Imagine your design is a big ball of mud. Everything is in one large function with probably several thousand lines of code, and you want to safely refactor it into several smaller functions that each do one thing that will be easier to understand and reason about. However, when you try that, there are these local variables that are getting in the way, making it difficult to do that cleanly. In this guided learning hour, we're going to learn to do a transformation that helps you to prepare a section of code for extraction. We're going to learn split variable. Hi, I'm Emily Bache. I'm a software developer and creator of Saman Coaching. I would like to thank my sponsor, Tuple. They make a tool for remote ensemble and pair programming. A small, bootstrapped team of engineers who care deeply about software quality. I've tried Tuple and it worked well. It was really smooth, especially to switch who is typing. It feels great to partner with like-minded people and have Tuple as our first sponsor. If you're looking for a tool to make pair and ensemble programming easier, more effective and fun, check out the link in the show notes. Welcome to this learning hour. This video is designed to be done together with others in your development team, and the focus is on coding skills and team building. If you haven't seen one of these before, I have another video, Guided Learning Hour How To, and I recommend you watch right to the end, because the last part is a session briefing that explains more. Let's go to the shared online activity board where I've prepared some materials for you. We're going to begin by just scanning this piece of code that I've got on the activity board. I say scanning because I just want you to read it at a fairly superficial level, just looking for code smells. And specifically, I want you to look for code paragraphs. And if you find one in your group, you could move this little box and put it round that piece of code that you think is a paragraph. And there's probably more than one, and they could be nested inside one another, so you might need to have a good look. Just in case you've forgotten what a code paragraph is, I've got a reminder for you here. This is a piece of code with visual characteristics that helps you to spot it. So it often begins with a short comment, or it could just be a block of code that seems to hang together, or it could be separated by white space from the rest of the function, or there might be a repeated word that you're seeing coming up in lots of places in one section of code, and that implies to you that that piece hangs together. And this is a code smell indicating there could be a missing name here. You might do well to extract that piece as a method. But whether you can or not is for future investigation. Spotting code paragraphs is all about visual clues. So go into your groups now and just spend a few minutes, not too long, just seeing if you can spot any code paragraphs in this code. Of course, I don't know what you came up with in your groups and whether you all came up with the same paragraphs as me or not. I mean, the thing is, there aren't really wrong answers here because people see different things in the code. The real test of whether it actually is a useful code paragraph that you've spotted is whether you can extract it as a method. Before I do that, let me just say, I think the reason I chose this block as a code paragraph is the white space before and after. This switch statement seems to hang together as a block to me. And this piece of code here about volume credits seems to start with a little comment and have this repeated word volume credits. So I've picked out those three paragraphs. You may have different ones. It's fine. The next thing, of course, though, is to work out, can we extract any of these as methods? In this demo, I'm going to show a part of the theatrical player's refactoring kata. And you may not be using the same programming language or refactoring tools as me, but what is important is to watch the way I'm doing the refactoring safely in small steps. And this is the same approach that Martin Fowler takes in his book, Refactoring. This is the theatrical player's refactoring kata. You may recognise it. And I've got the same code that we were just reviewing, only now it's in my IDE. There are some good test cases here, which I'll just run and show you. If I make any refactoring mistakes, they should fail and warn me. Okay, so the first paragraph I spotted was this switch statement here. It's got lots of white space around it and it's a code block. So let's see if we can extract that. And yeah, it's offering to extract it and call it get this amount. And then I'm noticing actually, this amount is appearing on the previous line as well. So maybe if I just include that line as well, that would make a better code block. Yeah, I'm going to call that amount for, because it's the amount for that performance in that play. So that was a quite straightforward, successful extract method. And now my overall function is a bit shorter and I can see it all on the screen at once. There was another code paragraph here for the volume credits. I reckon that these lines of code would make a good paragraph. So when I try and extract this one though, I run into a small difficulty. The signature it's suggesting is got volume credits, this local variable, both as the return value and as one of the method parameters. So I'm not going to do that. Let me just back that out and take a closer look at this volume credits local variable. So it's being declared up there, and here it's being appended to in two places. So this variable it's kind of getting in the way a little bit of our method extraction. We'd like to be able to extract a method that really makes sense, and it's not working at the moment. What we need is a split variable. And before I demo that for you here, let's talk a little bit more about what we mean by split variable and look at a simpler example. Are you enjoying the session? I hope so. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel, because what we all want is higher quality code so we can deliver better software more reliably. It takes skill to refactor safely, and training sessions like this are a great start. Although it can be considerably more daunting to do refactoring in your production code, and it helps to have support from somebody with experience. The Saman Technical Coaching Society is the organisation that I founded for technical coaches, and you could get help and advice from there. Sign up for our newsletter on the website or come along to one of our free events. Saman Coaching. Growing excellence in coding together. Tennis game 3. Now you may have seen this exercise before and even tried it out, so you might remember what I'm about to show you, but I'm just going to focus on the one little aspect of it where you need to do a split variable. We've got good tests here, so I'll just run those before I do any changes. Yeah, but I want to draw your attention to this variable s. It's a terrible name for a variable, but then all the variable names here are pretty bad. Now the thing is, it's being used in lots of places, s, and in the first part of this code, it's actually denoting a point name. It's choosing one of the elements of this array, love, 15, 30, 40. So s could profitably be renamed to like points name or something. But that doesn't work for the second half, because the developers reused exactly the same variable in the second half, where it's actually the name of a player. We're saying advantage for player name or win for player name. So the developer here, I think, has been a bit lazy and reused the same variable. And this is something you don't often see in modern code, actually. It's more a hangover from like C, where you had to declare all your variables at the start of the function and people would just like, oh, it's too much hassle to declare a new one, I'll just reuse the same one. So this doesn't happen so often these days. But it is actually pretty straightforward to fix if you do spot it, like I have here. So let me show you how to fix this. Now, the immediate reaction is, well, maybe we should just do a rename. But if I try and just rename it, of course, it's going to rename all of the usages, not just the ones I want. So that actually, the refactoring tools don't help us here with that. Instead of doing a straightforward rename, what I'm going to do is just go back old school and do a search and replace, but with a highlighted section of code. So because I've highlighted just the first half where it's supposed to be a points name, when I do the replace all, it just replaces it in that part I've selected. And of course I've broken the compilation, so I need to redeclare the variable there, where it's actually now a different variable, which means of course I can rename this one now with the tools and call that one player name. So that's looking much better. I have successfully split the variable, and now I don't need to declare it quite so far from its first use. So I'll just use the tool to fix that. Then I want to move on to a slightly more complex example. Here I've got tennis game 7, which is actually very similar to tennis game 6 if you've done that one. But I've just modified it a bit to make it easier to practice split variable. So we've got this variable with a long scope, result, and it's being assigned to all over the place in this long function. And we would like to be able to extract some paragraphs here as methods. So we've got a nice paragraph here with this little comment at the start saying tie score. So we want to extract this. And we get that problem we saw before in theatrical. This is the same problem here. We've got an accumulating variable, and it's appearing both as the result of the function and as an argument, which is that's not really what we want from a new function. So although we can think of a good name for it, tie-score, it's not really the function we want to extract. So I'm going to back that out. Before I do that extract, I'm going to do my split variable. Now, the easiest way I've found to do this, which makes me less confused, is to declare two new variables at the start. Now, the first thing that this variable is doing is it's keeping track of what was the initial value before this block of code. And then the other thing that we're using the same variable for then is keeping track of what we've incremented to it. So I declare a second variable which is going to keep track of the increment to this accumulating variable. And I'm calling that tie-score because that's what it's going to be. It's going to accumulate the new value for a tie-score. Then again, I'm going to do the old school search and replace in a section of code. So in this section here, we are calculating the increment on the result, which is the tie-score. So I'm just doing a normal search and replace. And then I need to assign back to my accumulating variable both the initial value and the increment. And that then works. My tests are all passing. So I have split the result variable into now actually two new variables here in this section of the code, the initial value and the tie-score. And this means that I should be able to do my extract method a bit more successfully now. And I can select all of the parts of the code which is calculating the increment, the tie-score, and I can easily name that get tie-score, and it's got a good empty argument list. It's a nice function. So that was a successful split variable and then extract method. And at this point I could do some inlining of those extra variables if I don't want to keep them. But when you do this a minute as an exercise, you can do the same thing to endgame score and regular score, which I've got here. And of course, on the theatrical players that I showed you first, which is the same as this. It's also an accumulating variable. It's an integer rather than a string, but it's the same steps for the refactoring. Now, that's quite enough probably for a lot of people for this exercise, and those are probably the two easiest ways to do split variable. But there is a third situation where I use this, and I wanted to just show you this. Here I've got another code kata. This is Office Robot Cleaner, and there are like 12 or 14 variants. I can't remember quite how many there are. But what you want is variant number 1, Office Cleaner 1, and the Robot Cleaner class. And there is a variable that I want you to practice splitting here. Again, there are good tests, so make sure you're running those as you're refactoring. The variable I want you to split is a data member of this class, coord hash set, which is also a terrible name. Maybe you can rename it. But the point here is that the way it's getting in the way is that it's going to make it difficult for me to extract a method down here. So I've got this function here, parse input. It's not a function, it's a method actually, and it's using this data member coord hash set. And I've just highlighted it here. And this variable is, it's also an accumulating variable, but it's also a data member. So it's a little bit more challenging. It's got two things that are challenging. And I would like to extract this paragraph here, basically, as a function. And when I extract that, it does it, but I get a signature that I don't like. It's a void method with no arguments, which is, okay, it's not very easy to test. Ideally, I would like a pure function, which I can call from my test suite, which has, and a pure function, has all the things it needs to return in the return value and all the things that it needs to do it at all in the argument list. And this has got no arguments and no return value. So that's no good. So what I want to do is, instead of like splitting the scope of the this coordinate hash set within this original method, I want to change it into a local variable. So splitting the scope of it. So instead of having a data member, I'll have a local variable with the same type, which I'm going to call coord hash set underscore local. This is the local variable which I'm going to use during this method. And then I can do that search and replace in the section of code that I want to extract in a minute. I'm going to replace the data member with my local version. And when I've done that, I need to then, after this section of code, assign back the data member to my new local variable with the same type. And that works. So the code is still compiling and the tests pass, but now I've got a section of code that I can extract as a method. And now, instead of being void, it's returning that increment on my coordinate hash set. So I can then have a function that's a bit more testable, which is better. But again, I'm not entirely happy with that because there are other data members here. There's the cleaner parser and the position, which are still being used as data members. So I'm backing that out, and I'm going to leave it to you. I'm not going to show you how to fix this, but I also want you to look at the position, see if you can split that in a good way, and come up with this really testable method here instead of this function. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to go and do those exercises yourselves and try out this split variable. But first, I just wanted to recap the theory a little bit. The basic idea is that we have some variables with a long scope that we think we need to split, partly because they're just getting in the way of extracting methods. I've showed you the three main situations when this happens. First, like tennis 3, where you've got a variable just being reused for a different purpose. So you just want it to have more than one variable. Or like tennis 7, where you've got an accumulating variable and we want to split the initial value from the increment. Or like the robot cleaner, where we've got a data member that we want to split into from the data member also a local variable that we can then process in a static method that will be testable. So those are the situations that I want you to try out. I've written down here the steps, the safe steps for each one of these refactorings. The better you have proper steps to do it in, the less likely you are to make a mistake. So do refer to these instructions for those three situations. But otherwise, I want you to get stuck in. Start with tennis 3, it's a fairly easy one. And then you can get on to tennis 7, theatrical players, the first example I showed, and then office cleaner 1. Great, I hope you've enjoyed doing some coding today. Just here at the end of the session, it's time to reflect on what's happened and what you've learned. So I'd like each person to write their own note, put in your own words. How will you remember this? How will you spot if you need a split variable? And then once you've spotted it, how will you remember to do it in small, safe steps? Everyone write a note. Great stuff. So next time you're breaking apart a long function, I hope you'll remember to use small, safe steps and that you'll look out for places where you need to do a split variable. Happy coding! This is the session briefing, intended for the developer or coach who's going to host the guided learning hour. And if you haven't done one of these before, I have another video, Guided Learning Hour How To, with more information. I recently updated it, so even if you've watched this video before, now is a good chance to review it again. Also, don't forget you can get additional resources from Patreon, including a copy of my activity board, and that could save you some time. In this particular guided learning hour, there are several points where I ask you to pause the video and lead activities with your team. It shows here roughly how long each activity should take, and you may need to adjust these timings based on your experiences and previous sessions, although I do advise keeping these learning hours short. You'd rather stop when people are still getting value and enjoying themselves, so that they'll be willing to join a follow-up session. In this session, there are 3 points where you need to pause the video and lead activities with your team. We've got to connect, concrete practice, and conclusions. So let's just go through what you're going to need to do at each point. In the connect, everybody's going to work in small groups to practice doing some code reading, some scanning, and looking for code paragraphs. Now, I have a previous guided learning hour all about code paragraphs, so if people don't seem to know what that is, you might want to do that one first before this one.
But generally, we're splitting into small groups to do this code reading so that people can get some practice at it and gain fluency with this technique. So rather than doing it all together, I think it's a good idea to split into smaller groups. And then just be encouraging. There are no wrong answers here. What you can do as a facilitator is just kind of zoom out on your activity board and watch those squares moving. And when you think that all the groups have got at least one square around a bit of the code, then hopefully you've given them long enough to spot some code paragraphs and you can call them back. But do have a time limit too. One of the points of scanning code is it should be fast. So if you're spending a long time on this, then people haven't got the idea. They should be very quickly spotting these paragraphs. Then in the concrete practice part of the learning hour, you're going to work on these code exercises that I've just demoed. Now, I've chosen exercises from like 3 different repos for this, and I'm hoping that most people have already got them installed, but if they haven't and you think that's going to take a lot of time for people to get those all set up, it might be a good idea for you to prepare a repo specifically for this session with all the code that everyone needs in their language that they like, and so they can get going really quickly with this exercise. I do recommend you work in pairs because again we're training a bit of fluency with the technique for split variable, although if people have really never done this before you could do it all together and that would be fine as well. Just remind people that we're trying to get better at refactoring, more accurate, to do it more safely, and there are lists of steps for each of these situations that I've got on the activity board that they can refer to make sure they're doing the safest possible refactoring that's not going to introduce any bugs, and to run the tests frequently just to check they didn't make any mistakes. Just at the end, make sure to leave enough time for the conclusions. It shouldn't take long, just a few minutes. You want people to reflect on what happened and make a plan for using this new knowledge. So each person should write their own note of their own thoughts about this topic. This is for them. If they do write a note, it's very encouraging for everyone else to see what they've written, and for you, of course, as well as a facilitator. But really, this is for them to make their own plan, and they might prefer to do that on a little piece of paper on their desk or in the notes on their own computer. So it's not a deal breaker if they're not showing you what they're writing, or if they're not writing at all. This is for them. Try and be encouraging, but don't be too disappointed if they write somewhere else.
This learning hour is more fun to do in a group. I hope you feel confident now to try it out with your team. Happy coding!